department. So yeah, I got a motion for that.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? We already got you on that, Mike. Okay.
Okay.
All in favor of items 1 through 5, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstention? Great, then we are finished for Board of Control. Thanks, guys.
Am I here?
You are here and we are now live on YouTube.
Amy, did you mail out packets this week?
Yes, they were mailed out by the city manager's office. Did you not get yours?
Nah, not again, no.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have
get
an
all my-
electronic copy?
I get all my, I copied some. I get all my coupons after the month's expired. You send the Ace Hardware discount coupons.
Yeah.
I got them yesterday for January.
I think we're going to start hand delivering them. Might work out better.
I can come
Yeah.
pick mine up. It's no trouble.
Yeah, I can come pick mine up too if you just let me know. I just got mine today, and I got the one from the last council meeting 4 days ago.
I haven't got the last one yet.
Oh my gosh, so crazy.
Nick, don't get mad at me, but in Cuyahoga Falls, we would give them to the cops to deliver.
Oh boy, we
I'm
tried
not
to-
mad. I'm
we
not mad.
did that once. Woo!
I've
We
had
do
that
have
happen here.
staff deliver the planning commission and BZA. We actually drive them and drop them off.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start doing that. I don't mind.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's a good idea to have cops in the council members' driveways. The neighbors might get suspicious.
Hey, we tried that and there was a lot
For
of
some of the
static
council
over it.
members.
Hey, Bridget, you're going to either have to get taller or change your computer camera.
I'm texting a kid and trying to get myself organized for council at the same time. That for whatever reason, after this many years, they still forget that Wednesday's council night.
I know.
They-
All right,
they'll
guys, it's
ignore me
7
for
o'clock.
hours.
7 o'clock, I'm gonna call the order the Kent City Council Committee meeting of February the 3rd. Welcome aboard. We're gonna start with Committee of the Whole. Do we need to call order? Amy, do you need roll call? We generally don't do that.
No,
all right.
no, thank you.
We're gonna move into Committee of the Whole, and it's the yearly thing of overview of the pending items on the pending list that come to council throughout the years. So Dave, do you want to go down the list and tell the recommendations of the staff, and then if council wants to leave it on the pending list, they can. If not, we'll take it off.
Okay, yeah, so since you all didn't get your packet, I will try to give a little bit of just a verbal summary of each item, just in case you don't have the ability to see it. The good news is, really, almost, I'd say 3/4 of them are carryover items that have already actually been finished and you just wanted to stay on, or they're items that we should say we're still working on. So there's really not a whole bunch of new stuff in here, but the first item was study of pedestrian vehicles, four-way stops, pedestrian safety in the downtown area. You've had a number of presentations on that. We've done a bunch of different things. Your recommendation in 2019 was that we met that objective already, but you still want to keep it on there just to remind everybody that that's important. So we're fine keeping that on the list if you all want to just keep that on the list.
I hear any objections? If not, we're going to keep it on the list. Mr. Kuhar.
I don't know that it's really necessary because we've had the safety precautions down on the south end, and the main purpose of this coming up was the north end, North Water Street and that, and that's a construction project in its process now, and so it looks like things are underway. I don't know.
Heidi?
Well, I would like to say that there should be an ongoing evaluation of the Erie and DePeyster and Erie and Water Street intersections, because I still see confusion at those intersections with cars and pedestrians. And I just would like to I'd like to keep monitoring that.
I really only see one objection with John, so let's leave it on. We'll move forward.
Item number 2 was asking the Sustainability Commission to come up with 10 action items to fend off global warming. And that was actually done in different formats. The Sustainability Commission put a Tree City Bulletin article. I think we had a report back to council. So again, they've done the initial request, but they're very busy still working on the climate action plan. And I know that was sort of a piece of one of the items that they had on the global warming protection. So that's still underway. So we're fine if you want to just keep that on there until they wrap that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
number 3.
Number 3 was the city checkbook, and that was actually a former administration down in the governor's office and the state auditor's office. I'm not sure the free format is even still available. There was always, we've never been against the concept. It's just, it actually had a bunch of quirks in the systems that didn't make it very useful. And I know Rhonda actually had it in her former city. She said, getting the compatibility and getting all the data inputted was a pretty major task. And then the disappointment was nobody used it. And it was sort of bulky, cumbersome. And so in the end, I know she was sort of saying if they had to do it again, they probably wouldn't do it. And she reminded me that anytime anybody wants to see any financial reports, we're happy to share it. And frankly, we can share it in a more user-friendly format. So I think in this one, we recommend removing it from the list.
Okay, Roger, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think that it's a moot point. I think we should take it off. I'm sure that some state agency is going to come up with something new and better, and we can consider it then, but there's no sense leaving it on there. It just
All right, you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I'd move to remove it.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, Jack, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. Number 3 will be removed.
All right. Number 4 was actually, I think it was Tracy. I remember, it seems like it was ages ago now, but it was possible sponsorship for Syrian refugee families. And we did a bunch of work back then trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah.
And Akron had an agency that was very engaged in that. Well, then, as you recall, sort of administrations changed, immigration policies changed. And I think the Akron agency isn't even still existing anymore. So as a result of that, I think we'd recommend removing it, and because the Syrian crisis may have passed. And if you want to resume, I think we certainly want to be a welcoming city, an immigrant-friendly city. But I think we've accomplished the mission of that particular item.
That's fine. It's probably never going to happen anyway. So.
All right, Tracy, you want to make the motion to remove it?
Yeah, I'll move to remove that one.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Kuhar. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, number 4 will be removed also.
Number 5 was explore a senior center advisory committee. You guys that have been on council a couple of years remember this was a very active discussion maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Councilwoman Melissa Long was very much sort of a champion of this concept, and council was quite interested in it too. We had some meetings, we had some people come in and kind of talk about senior centers, and at the time, John Idoni was Parks Director, and he was looking at a community rec center, and maybe that could be a part of the rec center, or, there was all kinds of discussions. It didn't really pan out as far as like either included in the rec center plan, master plan. But what I would say is there's going to be another new Parks Director, and I think they're still working on their Parks and Rec master plan update. So if you just want to keep that on, just to keep it as an item that you're interested in at some point, maybe it can be integrated into the master plan for Parks and Rec. That'd be my suggestion.
Is there any preference?
Keep it.
Keep it? All right. We'll move on. Number 6.
This was a request to have Hope kind of give us some feedback about conflict of interest, boards and commissions, whether, if someone is both a contractor and a commission member, can they speak about projects that come before their board if they're like an architect or something like that. So Hope, when I checked with her, she said, she had started looking into that. But to be honest, when COVID came along, it kind of got bumped. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a particularly pressing issue necessarily. It has not been forgotten. But she said, hopefully as things settle down this year, she should be able to get something back to council this year. So we recommend keeping it on.
Any preference? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 9 or 7.
This one was the unattended vehicle idling policy. There was some findings that were shared with council about a year ago. Council also at that time asked to continue those discussions. So we have not had an opportunity to kind of come back to you on that. I think it's another example where it just hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention because we've been so busy with the COVID stuff. So I recommend keeping it on.
Any
Is there-
preference?
Is there some
Seeing
way,
none,
is there
Go
some
ahead,
way we
Ms.
could,
Kuhar.
I believe there are already state laws in effect for that particular situation,
No,
but both for idling what do you call it?
unattended.
Vehicles. And then there's some temperature guidelines on both ends, up and low.
I don't know.
Know anything about that?
I don't. Well, no, I think for public safety reasons, you can't leave a car running and run into your drugstore or something. So Nick, maybe you could speak to that, but I don't think from a public health. I think this was originally, I think, from an air quality perspective.
Yeah.
If you want me to offer some input on there is a law on the books, both city and state, for vehicles parked running and unattended. Essentially what that is if your keys are in the car is running and you're not there with the car, it is a citable offense.
Okay. Glenn, you had your hand up.
yeah, I was wondering if there's some way we could just combine with this with the Sustainability Commission, the 10 actions to fend off global warming. It seems to me that if the objective is to reduce gas-powered vehicles and what they're emitting, maybe that could be part of that, and we could just kind of include that in there, and rather than just make it specific on the pending list for motor vehicles only.
Sure.
Tracy?
That's fine. We can fold it in with the sustainability committee. Just pass it on to them.
Okay, so Roger.
Well, I just like to point out that, first of all, Nick, I appreciate you're having that right at your fingertips, but we somehow have to get the information out to our community. I think, we sit here and I'm betting that, Amy, what do we have? 100 people watching this tonight, maybe on YouTube. And so how do we get this out? We passed legislation, or we say that this is important legislation, which I agree it is. And it's already on the book. So how do we get our community, I think a better plan or a better point of interest under this would be, how do we educate our public about it? Because I think there are a lot of people who don't know that that's already a law. And somehow we need a strategy. That's all I'm suggesting.
Gracie?
Well, we could put it back into committee to think of a strategy. I mean, one strategy is just post it on the places where people tend to do that the most, like they have, you have placards on, you're not allowed to cut across the driveway or something, no shortcutting, whatever, by ordinance, so and so and so. You just post them on the doors so people see when they walk in. That's one strategy, but we could put it in committee to discuss it. And Nick could come up with some ideas.
Yeah, I like the ticket, Nick.
Heidi?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest issues, I believe, are service workers. They could be city, but they could be, from, utilities and, people like that might be engaging in such activity that maybe we could just make sure that everyone in the city and all of the vendors that work for the city are aware that this is a city policy. So it's worth, maybe having a discussion around public education, including, not just, including people that work for and with the city.
Mike?
I say it's 3 out of 4 people that pull into any service station to go in and get coffee or cigarettes, whatever they're going to get, their cars are running, their lights are on. I think it's going to be a hard thing to educate people because they don't care because it's cold outside and they're keeping, their cars are warm.
Roger?
Well, you know, COVID has caused a rapid increase in the DoorDash and food, you know, all these delivery things. And they certainly don't turn their cars off. They, you know, they pull right up to my neighbors. They actually sit in the street, cars running. They get out, deliver their pizza, cars running. And so I think you're right. I think we're going to have to, I'm not sure that strict enforcement initially is going to work. I just don't think people think of this as an issue. So somehow, I don't know how to, you would think as a lifelong educator, I could come up with a way of educating people, but I'm kind of lost on this one.
Tracy.
Mayor,
Well, it sounds like it should be kept on the list then as is, to me.
Put it in committee.
All right.
Everybody's really talking about it.
Robin,
Mayor?
I seen your light come on.
yeah, I did have a question or response. The chief indicates that it's already a violation of city ordinance, and therefore a citation could be written for it. The educational aspect of it, probably, as was stated, putting this back into, I guess, with either back in the committee or back with the Sustainability Commission for additional exploration would probably be more appropriate. But if in fact there is an issue of a violation of a ordinance in the city, that can be a lesson learned if there's citations written. So I think you have a separation of two things. One of them is already an enforcement mechanism that exists. It'd probably be a little difficult for the police going around having to, start writing tickets and everything over something like that. But it is a situation where, a few of those, and maybe, us highlighting after going through the process of doing the study on it, exactly what the impacts to the community would be the appropriate way. But mine would be separate. Well, you have to separate because one is a violation of the city code or ordinance, and the other is one of education. So yeah, keep one, put it back into a committee or the Sustainability Commission, and the other one is, the police already have the authority to cite people for leaving their vehicles standing.
Are you done? Robin?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
Tracy,
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think the ordinance says with keys in the car, and a lot of cars, you don't need to leave the keys in right now to keep them running.
Mhm.
So that might be that right there, they could get out of it technically.
Mr. Goulart?
A question for Hope. If I recall, when we had this in committee, she was saying something about that there were some exclusions to that for weather. Is that correct, Hope?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what, without looking at the ordinance, I don't want to say one way or another, but I think there is. And quite frankly, I thought that, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought that some of our conversations were more on city vehicles that are idling, because we have a lot of city vehicles that need to idle. The fire, police with their, computers in them and things like that. I thought that's what we were talking about. So I feel like I'm out in left field right now. But I can take a look at that.
Point of order, we're just supposed to decide to keep it on the list or take it off.
You're right, Tracy.
We're not,
getting
we're
into
on
a
the
committee
discussion.
meeting.
Yeah,
You've
I'd
already
say
started.
keep it on the list.
All right. Is there no objection? We're going to keep it on the list. Moving on to number 8.
Number 8 was the last month we brought before you the request to sell a piece of a piece of city land off of Ivan Drive. And so we just haven't come back to you yet. So keep that on the list.
Any objections? That number 8 will be on the list again. All right, that does it with the administration. Committee of the whole, the discussion dealing with diversity in Kent. We talked about this, and because of the situation we're in, the COVID-19 and all that, we figured this would be better to be an in-person committee meeting. So we'll keep it on the list unless somebody's got some objection not to do it the way we're going to do it. Seeing nothing, it stays on the list.
Okay.
All right.
I respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it should stay on the list, but I also think we shouldn't necessarily say we're going to wait until we can meet in person. I think there may be a situation or cause at some point to bump that up to prior to when we meet in person, because Lord knows when that will be. And we may end up wanting to bring that into committee sooner than later. So I don't really want to make it contingent upon meeting in person. I just think it's maybe a good idea.
Dave?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to, based on what Heidi just said, I want to remind everybody, just because council hasn't had a meeting, a group meeting on this, there is absolutely ongoing meetings between the police department, local African-American groups, other minority groups. There is ongoing meetings with the Portage Collaborative. You've been invited to those. Staff has been attending those. There's meetings going on at Kent State. And of course, we continue to get, I think Roger said, more information than we necessarily asked for out of Nick, but each week he sends his update. And each week, I swear, it seems like every week he's got some new update regarding their efforts regarding diversity or social equity. And particular, I think the last week's was all about the body cameras and the analysis that's going on and meeting with the vendors. And so I certainly, for the good of the whole, I don't want you to think that the staff or anything is waiting for Zoom to end. It's ongoing. And honestly, there's a lot of momentum to some of those groups. And I know Gwen, at least, I think the mayor might have attended some of the Portage Collaborative. So there's some really positive things going on, even without council specifically dealing with it.
No, Dave, you're absolutely correct. So, I mean, it's still going to be on the list. We're still going to work with it. All right. Moving in, Community Development Committee, Senior Housing. Who's going to speak to that?
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was just going to say, it's really very similar. It's a carryover item there's one of the items that was in committee regarding seniors, and one of the items in the senior category was senior housing. So we have continued work. We tried, Bridget can speak to different developers that we've met with at different times. Probably the leading project right now is an ongoing effort with Kent State University to redevelop the former Allerton apartment complex into a multi-generational kind of facility. So there's private stuff going on, and there's this partnership. I don't know, Bridget, if you want to mention anything about the private stuff.
There is actually some activity. A tax credit developer is looking at some of the sites Kent State was selling on 261. The trick with the tax credits, however, is until the applications come out, you do not know the nature and focus of the project. So while they might say that the 1 year it's senior housing with an assisted living component, the next year it could be a completely different model geared towards a different population of low to moderate income. But we have had a couple meetings with the developer for sites off of 261, basically. They're actually, I think, still in discussions with the county because it's county's sanitary. So,
Mr. Kuhar.
I think this is a topic that we're going to continually come up in front of us. So I would suggest keeping it on.
If there's no other objection, it's going to stay on the list. Seeing none, we'll move on. Number 1 will stay on the list. and community development. Moving into land use committee, simple recycling.
Yeah, I'll jump in if it's okay. This was, this was an idea we were pretty excited about when it first came out. And then remember council actually had it moving along pretty quickly. So quickly, in fact, that some of the local volunteer agencies were worried about the impacts on their donations. So it kind of got pulled back in. I personally think the timing of this is just past. I think it could probably come off. I know at that time, council still was excited about the idea, but I'm just not sure it really has any sort of traction and is likely to have any. So I'd recommend probably pulling that out.
Any motion to that?
I'll move to remove it from the list.
No,
Is there a second?
no. I just wanted to say something real quick. This might have to be a way to go in the future because I don't know how well the recycling center is doing right now.
Sure.
I
So-
feel like I'm paying 2 trash bills right now.
Yeah,
me too.
maybe we should just keep it on here for a while.
That's fine.
All right, well,
So okay, so finish the motion.
wait a minute. Glenn made the motion. Is there a second? If not, it's gonna die. All right, guys.
I second it.
Oh, wait, Garrett seconded. Glenn, do you have further discussion?
No, just following up on what Dave said, it seems like the time for this has sort of passed. By making this motion, though, does this mean that we can't bring up a discussion in the future about recycling options?
No.
Okay.
I don't see it that way. Garrett, do you have further?
The recycling was more for materials and clothing and towels and that kind of stuff. And that was the concern that the stuff that fills up landfills, it doesn't break down easily. And the thought was if you could get this stuff out of landfills, but then obviously the charitable organizations were opposed to it. So I agree taking it off. Makes sense at this time because we can always approach it in the future.
Okay, open discussion, Mr. Kuhar.
Yeah, I think what we'll see if we take it off is, given a little bit of time, we're going to have different technologies and different things happening that will deal with this type of recycling differently. And at that time, I think that'll open the door to look at some new avenues.
Okay, is there further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No,
1 no, 2. Heidi, would you vote?
I voted aye, just because I think that it's really so narrowly focused to simple, this particular company. I think that it doesn't preclude us talking about recycling.
All right. The ayes have it, it'll be removed. Streets and sidewalks and utilities. There's 3 items there.
you forgot health and safety.
Health and safety.
I don't have any health and safety on
There
there.
aren't any health and safety.
That's
Where is
the
it,
low-
health and safety?
It's a low frequency.
noise. That was just put on, so I would assume that would stay on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're back to streets and sidewalks. Dave, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is an item that was obviously one of our most talked about items 2 or 3 years ago, and Jim did a bunch of different presentations. I don't want to jinx us, but I actually think we came up with some pretty good options there. You came up with different ways that residents can either accelerate or kind of get their sidewalks done a little faster. They can sort of options to partner with us or to get a beneficial rate through our contract. I dare say it's working reasonably well. It's not perfect. But because of, we value pedestrian activity and safety to such a degree, I think we should keep it on. I don't think sidewalks will ever stop being a priority in our community.
Any concern one way or another? Heidi, you have your hand up. Heidi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that staff has made a wonderful progress in this, but sidewalk upkeep continues to be a problem in our city. And I think that there's other considerations that we need to keep the conversation going on. So at least the sidewalk upkeep discussion needs to be maintained, and we could be bringing some other ideas up in future. So please keep it on.
Tracy?
No, I didn't have anything.
All right. Okay, the recommendation is to keep it on the pending list. I don't see any objection to that, so it'll stay on the pending list. And with that, I think we're done.
Yep, thank you, Mayor.
No, thank you, Mr. Rowland. Very good job.
No, thank you. Next, somebody else has to say something now.
All right, now we're in the health and public safety.
Yeah, we have one topic today, and that is COVID-19 update.
That's our fearless leader, Joan. You don't need me. This is all you.
Unmute yourself, Joan. Joan, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I was just going to say, usually Dave likes to say a few words first. Amy, I don't know if you can share the PowerPoint that I sent you. Okay, that would be super. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you and just discuss a few topics related to COVID. I know that we're all have very well saturated with the topic, but there was some work. We did get a Kent State University master's student who is an intern for us in epidemiology. So he prepared a great portion of this report. And I think that that was sent in your packet. So we can go to the next slide and I'll just look at quickly the topics that I was going to discuss. Thank you. So we're going to look at this epidemiological report. Again, the full report is in your packet. I wanted to just touch very briefly on wastewater monitoring. I also wanted to touch on the COVID-19 vaccinations, as well as the needlepoint bipolar ionization. So we can go to the next slide, which unfortunately is a little bit, I did not get it as updated as I wanted to. And that we'll actually discuss, just in summary, that since, I don't know if the next slide can come up. Thank you. Since the start of the pandemic, that at this point, we had 1,240 cases. Today we have 1,926, but at the end of December, by December 31st, we had 1,494 cases. Our first case actually was identified on March the 6th of 2020. The age range during this time has been 1 year of age to 94 years of age. And actually 7 people have died in our community from COVID-19 during the 2020 year. Our positivity rate at the end of December was 13.9%. So the next slide will look a little bit in terms of the 2020 year with COVID, and you can see it's kind of that normal distribution or bell-shaped curve. We started to see cases going up, a little bit of a spike in July, but then really started to rapidly take off in August, September, October, and November. So these cases represent positive cases that came through the Ohio Disease Reporting System. Oops, that went a little fast, thanks. So 96% of the cases are confirmed by PCR testing. The other 4% were considered probable cases, and that either means that they were an antigen test, or they did not have a test, or they tested negative, but they had had exposure to a known case and were in close contact with that known case, and they also had COVID-like symptoms. So those together create the positive cases that we're seeing on that graph. Now, the next graph I think is also very interesting. It shows 2 lines showing an inverse relationship between the numbers of cases that are in blue and the age, which is in red. So what we're seeing here is that as the pandemic progressed, the number of people being affected by COVID were getting to be much younger in age. And so in terms of that, about 50% of all the cases in the 2020 year were in the age bracket between 20 and 29, which might reflect, the population of the college age students. Okay. The next slide looks a little bit at mortality. Well, it does look at mortality, and you can see that there was a stepwise increase. The more cases we had, there was more chance for people to become more severely ill. Of all the deaths that we had, all of those came in hospitalized patients. The case fatality rate of Kent City residents who died from COVID during the 2020 year was 0.47%, so approximately 0.5%. The age range of those who died was between 76 and 94 years of age, with the median age being 88. 57% of those who died were males, while 43% were female. 6 of the cases had 2 or more documented chronic conditions. This doesn't mean that their pre-existing condition was the cause of their death, but it does mean that having comorbid conditions or chronic conditions put you at higher risk for severe outcomes from COVID-19. And this then also highlights the governor's priority to put the elderly and those with early onset chronic diseases into a priority group to receive vaccine. Okay, the next slide then is showing by race. And while this is a bar graph, and at the bottom are white, above that is black, then Asian, other, and unknown. When we interview cases, they don't have to tell us the answer. And sometimes people choose not to as well. So we don't always know the race of all the individuals who have been affected by COVID. But when you look at this, you can see that while it appears that in the city of Kent, the majority of people affected by COVID were white, when you look at the numbers of cases by the percentage that that race makes up the population within the city of Kent, that there's actually a little bit different story. And what comes to the surface is that the leading group that was affected is actually those in the community of color. So African Americans or Blacks are definitely disproportionately affected by COVID-19 compared to other races. And that actually brings an end to the EPI report. And I do want to thank God's Love Bona, who did this report up for us. The next slide, actually, that was great timing. This is Portage County's slide of the zip code map. God's Love is also working on a Kent City specific one, so that at some point I'm going to be eager to see what that looks like, where we'll just be targeted on the Kent City. You can see this is of the past 2 weeks data. Kent, the zip code for Kent, is the leading color in terms of numbers of cases when compared to other communities that make up Portage County. That little light blue island that's right in the center of our zip code is actually Kent State University. They do have a different zip code than the rest of the city. So students on campus currently have a positivity rate of less than 3%. When we did the Ohio National Guard testing last week, our overall testing rate was 9.3% or 9.2% of everybody who attended. But for Kent City specific residents, it was 9.3%. So just a little bit of difference there. Okay. Thank you, Amy. The next one then is looking at wastewater and how that figures into pandemic. And there's actually a predictive value, because when people get exposed to COVID-19, you actually, when you ingest it, the organism can go into your GI tract, and that's why some symptoms are nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. This virus can, make its way through the digestive tract, and although it might be broken up a little bit into viral particles that are non-infectious, as we flush the toilet, those viral particles go into the drain. So if we test the wastewater, we can see if there happens to be a rise in the number of COVID particles that they're finding. And so what this gives you is then a 3 to 7 day kind of heads up that there might be problems coming, because as that number rises, it indicates that there's more virus being spread in the community. And this can be seen before people become symptomatic and seek testing. So it cannot provide data down to the individual layer, but it can, based on where you sample from, show, like in certain housing groups. So the next slide is actually very early data. And I do want to thank Kent State University. They've been great partners with us. They got a grant from the Ohio State University to do this very important work. And they're testing 3 dorms on campus, but then through discussions that we had, we asked them to do 2 off-campus housing units as well. And so again, they had to be student related because of the funding that they received. So this is very early data from 2 off-campus sites that have a lot of student housing. So you can see we started with a baseline sample early in January, and we continue to collect 2 days a week. I want to thank the people at water treatment, because water reclamation, because they have been phenomenal in terms of assisting with this to get the collection units. And then Eric Ozinski goes out twice a week to collect these samples. So we do see actually a fairly sharp rise at one location. And that's only 2 days worth of data there, so it's not enough to actually act upon yet. But interestingly, when we brought this up in Unified Command, the police actually mentioned that there had been an increased complaint calls from the same location for large gatherings and noise. So we're wondering if there might be, a relationship there that's actual. So we'll continue to monitor this. There are two committees through Kent State University that look at this data, and they share it with the state and review it there as well. So definitely more to come and more monitoring, but this is a great tool. It adds another layer of information that can then, along with the testing and vaccines, can kind of help us in terms of a strategy for containment and control. Speaking of which, that brings us to the next slide, which is the vaccine rollout, which is the big dependent that we have in terms of wanting to try to control by using vaccine. I'm not sure what, oh, there's the picture. Okay. All right. So we are still early in phase 1. We are still suffering with a limited supply. Currently right now, Kent City Health Department is still working on vaccine providership. We seem to be making gradual steps towards getting everything in place to safely store and provide vaccine to Kent City residents. But in the meantime, Portage County Health District is the lead agency in our county providing vaccines. And I know based on the fact that I have volunteered and worked with their vaccine clinics, they don't get in as much vaccine as they order. They don't get in as much vaccine as they would like to have, because they certainly have the capabilities, to provide this vaccine if they only had more of it. So we're still in phase 1.
Joan?
Yes.
Now, Portage County's been doing a tremendous job with their volunteers and everything, but is there any chance or fear that all the people that they vaccinated with phase 1, they're not going to have enough vaccines for the second shot?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And actually the response is that when the state sends out an allocation for your first dose, they have already stored the allocation for that group's second dose. So the local health department does not need to hold back those second doses. The thought is that they will be coming from the state, so everything that ships out should be used at the time. And the state is actually keeping very close record and making sure that you're using up all of your doses within the week's allotment. So yeah, a great question, but no hold back, because those second doses are supposed to be allocated for us.
Well, they are doing a terrific job, and the volunteers were doing a
Yeah, the Medical Reserve Corps, there's a lot of people that really want to help with this, because people are eager to see pandemic wind down. And those people who are volunteering are sometimes retired from the medical field. Sometimes they're from other fields, but they're all very eager to help out. And it's a great effort, because it's something that we need many hands to make lighter work, for sure. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Joan,
Sure.
hello.
Go on, Robin, you go first.
Go ahead, Robin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Trace. The identification process, how is that being done? How are we doing outreach to identify those individuals, and what kind of stratification is being employed to get to the people that we should have identified as at risk and priority? Where are we on that? Is that effective? Are we being effective in doing that? Can we do better? I'm sure we can do better, but
Right. We can always improve. We can always make things easier for those people seeking vaccine. And I think that that's certainly a goal, to get more vaccine out there and make it easier for people to access it, whether that's through, transportation to get to these sites, or whether that's through registration. Now, certainly the government has set I guess the guidelines or the tone in terms of his approach to the tiered, focusing on those that are most vulnerable, as well as trying to keep students in school. Those are his two main goals, and that's what's focused in the 1A and the 1B groups. Again, since Kent City Health Department has not gotten vaccine in yet, we have not been taking any registration. But currently there is on the Portage County Health District webpage, there is a registration form that actually just is like raising your hand to say, I want vaccine, let me know when it's my turn. And then they're calling and making appointments. Does everyone have access to the internet? Probably not. Is it leaving some groups out? Probably so. My concern is that we actually need to go to some of these communities like 55 and older and be in a common area like a foyer and give them their vaccine instead of trying to make them come out to us. And I believe that the governor is supporting that approach in some low-cost housing units and some elderly 55 and older communities where it's just too hard for these people to come out. And in terms of health commissioners discussing this, I know there's a lot of concern. A lot of elderly stay at home or they stay with family in a single dwelling, but they're homebound and they can't leave their house. So it makes it very hard. And with the parameters that are put on transporting vaccine, you cannot transport an individual syringe full of the vaccine. That's not allowed. So there's a lot of complexity to providing vaccine. Once the vaccine is unfrozen, you only have 6 hours to give it. Once it's drawn up in a syringe, you have 30 minutes. There's no preservative in the mRNA vaccine. So you really have to carefully strategize and make sure that you have the right number of syringes and the right number of arms so that no doses are wasted. And I know that Portage County is doing a phenomenal job of matching those two things up. They're not having waste. Yes.
Are you done, Robin?
yes, thank you, Mayor.
Gracie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so the Portage County vaccinations, now, do you have to be a resident of Portage County to receive them, or can you come in from another county to receive them?
The governor has said if you're an Ohioan, if you're even bordering on the state, you can come and get a vaccine here. But right now, because of the limited supply, Portage County is, I think, watching to make sure that you are in fact a Portage County resident. And that's part of the registration process. So as far as I know, and again, I'm not privileged to all that detail, but as far as I know and what I've seen in terms of working at the vaccine clinics, they have been Portage County residents that I've been giving these vaccines to.
I was just curious because there was an item on the news where a couple from, I don't know, Akron, I guess, went up to Ashtabula County to get vaccinated. And then they ended up getting a bad, an expired or a damaged vaccine.
Or maybe it hadn't been, the cold chain hadn't been secured. So
right. It was ruined, yeah.
And I think that was the governor's point, is that if we're all Ohioans, you should be able to go anywhere to get your vaccine that has it available, because he wants it in the arms of people, not sitting in a freezer. But when there's scarcity like we have, we just have not been able to open up to other communities. Now, some first responders that are in that group 1A, they might live outside of Portage County, but they work here. They work within our jurisdictions, and so they need to be covered because of the job that they do. Yes.
Go ahead, John.
Joan, I heard on the news last night that I won't mention the name, but one of the drug companies, drugstores, had distributed, I guess you'd call it tainted vaccine, because it didn't meet any of the requirements. It was old or something. They're not sure which people got the good and which people got the bad. And they were saying that where they're all going to have to be vaccinated again, but they don't even know who it is that has to be vaccinated again. And is it possible to, now you get a shot that was good or bad, either way, and then you get another shot, which is supposed to be your first shot. I mean, what's that do to you health-wise?
It's not tainted. So I thank you for asking that question, because that's implied that the vaccine was bad. What happened, to my level of understanding, is that the cold chain, I mean, these vaccines have to be kept very cold until they're used. They're frozen, and then they have to thaw for a half an hour, and then you have 6 hours to give them. It was my understanding that they could not definitively say that that cold chain was maintained for these vaccines. And so what that means is that the vaccine is ineffective. And the CDC, it was my understanding that the CDC was working with that pharmaceutical agency to direct and have them have those individuals receive what would be a third dose, or to make sure that they had 2 effective doses. It was also my understanding that they knew of at least 6 facilities or agencies where people had received this vaccine. So they knew to focus on those folks first to make sure that they received the correct effective vaccine.
But wonder if those people did get an effective one, but they're going to take another one to replace it.
Well, I think that they're pretty sure that of the 6, I think many of them were long-term care facility associated or assisted living type of facilities, that many of those individuals, they know who those people are. So
Oh, this wasn't the drugstore one.
this was the one related to the drugstore that was assigned through the federal act to provide these vaccines to those locations.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, so I think the next slide actually shows a little bit more in terms of the age breakdown of the phases for the elderly, and Portage County has followed this very closely in terms of who gets the chance or the opportunity to, when those tiers open up, to receive vaccine. We did learn this week as well that on February the 15th, Kent City Schools as well as St. Patrick's, they'll be open up to receiving vaccine, and they have selected Portage County Health District as the group to give them their vaccines.
I have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So as the age groups open up, suppose, for example, I'm having a hard time getting an appointment for my parents who are in their 90s.
Mhm.
So they missed their date because they couldn't get an appointment. So as the dates open up and they apply for appointment, do they kind of go to the head of the line when they're assigning appointments, or it's just first come, first serve?
I think it depends on the agency, and I'm not sure. I don't do the scheduling, so I can't really speak clearly to that, because I'm not sure how a community pharmacy is handling that.
Okay.
But I know that as the weeks go on, if you're 90 years old and you haven't had an appointment yet, you're going to still be able to get that. It's not that your week has passed and you're it's tough luck. You would still be eligible to get an appointment and get that vaccine. And then once you get one, you should be scheduled in to get your second, whether that's 21 days or 28 days later.
Okay, but they wouldn't go ahead of other people. It'd just be like in the group with everybody else.
They'd just be in that group, and it probably just depends on how they did the scheduling. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. All right. And then I believe the final slide that I have tonight is also some information that was in the Record Courier today. Again, speaking to another layer of protection, we're trying to use a multifaceted approach to keeping us safe. So I just wanted to give some kudos to our Chief Tosco, who worked closely with Kent State University. They had started using needlepoint ionization for their isolation and quarantine rooms on campus to try to help purify the air, because early on, we knew this was an airborne droplet type of disease where those particles could be suspended in the air for anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. So having a good way to filter and clean the air is very important. So needlepoint ionization has actually been around for a long time. It came about several decades ago to try to help restaurants with norovirus outbreaks, because again, it cleans the air. So ions are naturally occurring particles in the air. They come from like rushing water, crashing waves, sunlight, but they're able to either receive or give off an electron, therefore becoming neutral. And then things like dander, dust, smoke, mold, bacteria, and viruses can cling to those, or clump, a term that the company uses is agglomeration. Those larger particles then are more easily trapped in a standard HVAC system filter. So it's nice that the needlepoint does not cause any type of harsh or concerning chemical or byproduct as a result of this. It's a electrostatic energy that creates the ions that are then just filtered in the room. And what Chief Tosco is holding there in his hand is actually an ion counter, so that we have a way of checking the spaces where these units are to see that we're getting the levels that we need. So this is a great tool to use, not just during pandemic, but will make spaces safer even after pandemic, because again, they take care of smoke, bacteria, molds, and things like that. So it's really a great technology, and it's not too pricey. We were able to get ours covered, I believe, at least for the portable. What's on the left side of the picture is the portable unit. It's pretty lightweight and can be moved very easily. There's even smaller units that they're able to put in the emergency squads, much larger units for larger spaces that are permanently attached to the HVAC system. So I think this was great technology, and a nice example of how the city departments are working with Kent State and trying new, innovative ways in terms of, although the technology is not new, but just trying innovative ways to keep ourselves safe, not only for the employees, but for people who are interfacing with departments. So whether you're somebody that has to go to the police department to fill out a report, or a community member that needs their birth certificate, we have these ionization units running in our departments that are keeping the staff safe, as well as those people coming into them. So I believe that's my last slide. Yes, are there questions?
John?
I'm pretty familiar with the ionization process, but the only question I have in my mind about it is, it's trapping all the bacteria and all the dangerous viruses in the filtering system. How dangerous is the filtering system?
No, they would be trapped in there. And actually it destroys the COVID. It actually works on the virus protein outer layer. So it actually kills it. So it would not be transmissible from the filter. That's a good point and a great question. So
would other bacteria in that be trapped in the filter and be?
It would be trapped in the filter as well.
Yeah, so you'd have to be very careful when you change that filter.
Yeah, but fortunately it's very easy. It slides right in and out, and very easy to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions, Tracy?
Yeah, I have a question about safety. Right now, what we're doing to protect ourselves from the viruses, we're wearing masks, we're social distancing, we're trying to avoid crowds and indoor spaces. What kind of behavior how do we change our behavior when the more contagious versions come our way?
That's a phenomenal question. And we know if those variants are somewhere else, they will be in Kent at some time in the near future if they're not here already. So one thing that has been shown to be effective is to continue doing all those things we were doing for the original novel coronavirus. But in addition to that, double masking has been shown to be very effective with the more easily transmissible variants. So that would be something else.
The masks have to be to seal correctly on your face, or can they be the medical masks that are like the paper blue masks? Just wear 2 of those.
You could wear 2 of those, or you could wear a surgical mask and then a cloth mask over the top of it. And I believe that that's what this study was done with, was a surgical mask and then a cloth mask over the top of that.
Okay, and the surgical mask, you mean those blue ones?
Correct. Sometimes they're yellow, but yeah, sometimes they're blue. Mostly they're blue.
They're like paper, right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Roger?
You're welcome.
Roger?
You're on mute.
You're muted, Roger.
All right, I got it. Hey, Joan, thank you again. That was a great presentation. It gave us a lot of information very succinctly. It's something that we can tell our friends and constituents. My question is that I've been reading and it seems like there's still some question about, for those people who've had COVID, how long are they, are they able to fight off the infection? And I've heard everything from they can get infected immediately to they have 6 months. And I'm just kind of curious about that.
Well, we don't know about the new variant strains, and will those people that have had an earlier COVID infection be susceptible to those? So that's something that researchers still have to find out. Right now, the rule of thumb is 90 days past your original onset, you should be protected. That may not hold 100% true for everybody, but in any case, I know that they're finding that people who have had vaccine have higher antibody levels than some people who had very mild disease or asymptomatic illness, but tested positive for, whatever reason they sought testing for. So I think that that's something for people who are saying, I had the disease, I'm good, I'm covered. You may not be. So you want to continue to use those safety practices. And even if you've had COVID infection, you want to take vaccine when it's your turn.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah,
Oh, you're
thank
so
you very
welcome.
much. Yeah.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for all you're doing, Joan.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
All right, I think that's it for health and public safety. Moving on to streets and sidewalks, Mr. Sidoti.
Yes, we're going to have a consideration of a water line tie-in, and I believe Mr. Bowling is with us somewhere here.
Yep, thank you. So we received a request to tie into city water behind Raising Cane's for a car wash. And they're required to come to council and to seek your approval. We're actually required to provide service per our EPA agreement. And frankly, we could use a water customer on our existing service. So unfortunately, they're declining to participate in the JED, but fortunately, that means that they'll be paying 50% surcharge on their water consumption usage. So we're requesting council's approval to allow them to tie into the water main.
Any questions from council for Jim? I would say any questions from the audience? Not sure there's anyone there. All right, back to council. Do we have a recommendation for?
Move to approve the emergency.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Gwen second. Any comment, John or Gwen?
No, as everybody knows that they follow me, I do anything, try to get new customers and to benefit the city and help our finances. So I think it's a good thing.
Gwen, anything else?
Yep, sounds good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed,
Aye.
same sign. Okay, it passes, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, land use committee.
Yep, I call to order the land use committee, and we've got a presentation by Bridget on the Riverbend East dedication.
Yes, all of you received Jen's memo. This is the acceptance and dedication of phase 5, the final phase of the Riverbend subdivision. Jen included a map that showed the area that's covered by this dedication, as well as the punch list of the few minor items that will be finished up. The bond and insurance and everything was reviewed by Hope's office, and everything is in order. I can take any questions if anyone has it. I would like to say this is Jen's official last memo to council. For those of you that may not know, Jen is retiring effective March 5th. We're trying to figure out how we can do a social distancing retirement. See ya. So that should be coming, but she is fortunate to be retiring at 60. She's already got 2 trips scheduled for in the coming months. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out to her that she is going to be sorely missed and has done an amazing, I think she's done 3 of the 5 phases back there and managed that whole process for us. So anyways, just letting you know that we're losing a good one. So
When is she retiring again?
March 5th is her last day.
Okay.
Questions from council? Questions from the audience? Vote back to council.
Move to approve with emergency?
Second.
Jack, any comments?
No, Jen is great. I've worked with her. on many things, and she's just, we're going to really miss her. So I know Bridget, we're really miss her. So.
Definitely.
You're talking about Jennifer Barone, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, Jennifer Brown. Yeah, we're all in denial, pretending she's not leaving.
I can't believe she's 60.
I couldn't either. I thought she was like 40 something. I was like, wow. So
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Congratulations to Jen.
thank you. I'll
And,
pass it along.
Yeah, good luck finding a good replacement. That
Trust me,
concludes
it's
the
a
land use
struggle.
committee.
All right, moving on to community development. Mr. Kuhar, you're up.
Okay, well, we have Mr. Wilkie is going to give us a good overview of how our economic development projects have went through the year.
Good evening, and thank you for giving me your time. And since everybody didn't get their packets, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if Amy will let me.
You should be able
to. And can everybody see that?
No.
Nope.
Amy, are you letting me share?
I am.
Oh, here we go. Hang on.
There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay. So first off, 2020 will be remembered as the year of COVID and probably also the presidential election, both of which had an effect on the economy. As I go through this, as a quick caveat, I don't want to sound callous, as I won't be talking about the human suffering and the deaths that took place as part of COVID, only the economic impact of it. I'll leave it to Joan to talk about suffering and death, if that's okay with everybody. As I go through this, it's a typical agenda that I've used for the past 5 years, with the exception of adding the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic to it. But we'll start out with the completion of last year's projects, look at some new options that are that opened up during the year, some projects that are coming up soon, of course, the pandemic, and then some economic measures, which are pretty interesting this year. So you might remember the Battleground opened up right at the beginning of the year on Cherry Street, became a favorite very quickly. And then COVID hit. They were very quick to adapt. This, of course, is Kirk and Rosie Noden's place. And they had already had the small patio that you see on the left. And they quickly added and extended their liquor license to the backyard. And you can see the nice outdoor patio they created in the back as well. And this was very popular. So they started out very well. Of course, everybody was shut down on March 15th. And this represents what took place after the partial reopening in May. Very similar to them was the River Merchant, that was open for 6 days before the March 15th shutdown. For the record, that is not my car in front of it. And this, of course, is operated by Cameron Thomas, the son of Charlie Thomas of Ray's place. And once again, they also started off very well. They had a patio, or a deck actually, built into their plans right from the start, probably one of the most popular decks in all of Kent, as it engages the river directly. And then, of course, they had to shut down and reopen again in May. Same thing with Faux King, started out well, shifted to primarily a delivery service once things reopened, and then gradually reopened their dining room late in the fall as the weather started to get cool. The same owners of this place do plan to still open the Poke Bowl restaurant, but they haven't submitted plans yet, so I won't bring anything up on that yet. And then the Coyotes Mexican Grill and Restaurant out in the Franklin Jed across from Walmart opened up. And again, this is Angel, excuse me, this is Ramiro Angel and their family. And you can see on the left that they very quickly adapted as well and put a patio out in the front sidewalk with the cooperation of the Portage County Building Department. And I just want to comment on all these restaurants that opened up at the beginning of the year and then were quickly shut down by COVID and then partially reopened, kind of suffered a double whammy compared to restaurants that existed last year, in the sense that almost all of these restaurants that I've covered so far were not eligible for any of the grant programs. You had to be open by a certain time late last year to be eligible for the PPP loan, for example. And most of these restaurants did not qualify for that. So they really, took it on the chin in terms of not getting any protection once they reopened. And that's very unfortunate for them. But it also speaks to their resilience because they are still open and are hanging in there, and hopefully will be open when the weather returns to normal or returns to warmth, and they can use that outdoor dining capacity again. Of course, the Children's Hospital opened up out in Franklin Township, and probably didn't have quite the business they originally expected just because of the fear of COVID and people are not doing elective things, but they're starting to pick up as time goes by. And then, of course, there was the Crystal Clinic expansion where they joined the two buildings, the one on the left over here and the one on the right over here, with the expansion in the middle. And I actually had a reason to go there. It's a very nice expansion, and they started offering some new services in the fall to now a great walk-in orthopedic center in case you happen to break your arm or leg doing yard work in the spring, or I'm sorry, on the weekends or something along.
I can't hear you. Can everybody else hear him?
No. I think he's frozen.
Definitely frozen. But they reopened and are doing quite well, is my understanding, there in Acorn Alley. Then we had the North Water Brewing Company open up. Feel like I missed one here, but apparently not. The North Water Brewing Company opened up at the very north end of North Water Street there at 100 Crane Avenue. Don Sheldell and all the other members of the ownership group report that it's doing very well. In fact, it's exceeding expectations despite the COVID restrictions on occupancy, and hope to do quite well once they're able to take advantage of their patio and having the bike path right next door. The Tropical Smoothie Cafe opened out next to Starbucks out there at the 1005 East Main Plaza, and have been doing quite well. And if you're not familiar with their menu, it's much more than just tropical smoothies, and that's why I put the picture of the sandwich there. They have wraps and sandwiches, and it's a place to go grab lunch. It's not just smoothies. It is part of a chain, and it's a franchise concept. The Twin Lakes Tavern opened up. It was reopening, although they did change the name slightly. It used to be the Tavern at Twin Lakes. This is operated by Shannon Zemba and Emily Hansford, who operate other operations here in Kent. And their motto of their restaurant is a taste of the islands up north, and they specialize in seafood. And I'm so looking forward to going there when things warm up outside. And of course, the Dora opened up in this past summer as an option for folks, and proved to be quite popular. And that opened up in mid-July, and is still open today. Of course, with the weather the way it is, it's not as popular as it was. But come April and May, we expect it to be quite popular again. And we'll revisit this in June with City Council to make sure you're still comfortable with it. But based on feedback from both customers and the businesses, I think we'll all agree that it's a good thing to continue.
Can I ask you a question here, Tom?
As long as it's okay with John.
Tracy?
When we revisit in June, we can expand it then, the Dora?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
When we revisit it in June, we can talk about expanding then to other businesses?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, that will be one of the items on the agenda.
Okay.
Unfortunately, oh, I'm sorry, and then one more opening, where Pop used to be in Acorn Plaza, the fruit stand opened. This is somebody named Jason, who I started to work with several months ago, and was actually surprised when they opened. I didn't realize they were working so well with Michelle Hartman, and we're actually able to take over the entire Pop space and opened up with very strong sales. In fact, ran out of product several times in the first week. And then the flip side of all this is we had some closures this past year. And some, not all of which are COVID related. Lonzitanos have really opened up, or I'm sorry, closed right at the beginning of the COVID, and really was related to some problems they were experiencing prior to COVID. Peace, Love, and Little Donuts closed and never reopened. We did have 2 retail locations, Carnaby Street and Gracie Lane, that closed. They were already planning to close when their lease expired, so not necessarily directly related to COVID. And the same thing with Rush. It was really more about a lease expiration than it was anything related to COVID. Cheesemonger that closed near the end of past year probably was a victim of COVID, as well as you know, just their location and trying to get that visibility that they needed. But they will be missed, and I'm hoping that the Burbank properties will be able to replace them with something equally as attractive. And then something that caught us all a little bit by surprise was the Burger King on East Main Street closing.
Yeah.
And I talked to the district manager, and actually it always, I do have that fast food background, as some of you might remember with Taco Bell, and it did always surprise me that there were 2 Burger Kings in Kent. And they're both owned by the same franchisee. Carroll Corporation is the largest franchisee of Burger King. And when I talked to the district manager, they said they've been in discussions for quite some time, years actually, about closing one of the 2 locations in Kent. What surprised me is they chose to close one on East Main Street close to the university, as opposed to the one on South Water Street. But he said the one on South Water Street always outperformed the one on East Main Street. So that's why they made that decision. I do not expect that location to remain empty very long. There's already been a couple of national chains inquiring after it. It's a great location, with the exception of some access problems if you're trying to go east on East Main Street. And then here's some things coming very soon. Quench Juice Cafe, where Peace, Love, and Little Donuts was, will have a soft opening on February 13th. As you can see, they specialize in bowls and different versions of fruit, fresh fruit, and looking forward to that. To be a bit of a competition for the fruit stand, but we'll see how it all plays out. Now, this is part of a small chain. The woman that's opening this is from Russia. Her name is Natasha Bostrikov. And she sounds like a very driven and inventive woman. I'm looking forward to working with her. And then, of course, the Barrio expansion, which I just found out today, is actually already opened. I didn't realize they'd moved quite that quickly, but they did expand into what used to be the Yogurt V location. And I understand they did their signature artwork, and it looks very nice inside. And that is open now, and they more than doubled their occupancy.
Wow.
What's coming soon in about 3 weeks is where Pizza Fire is a concept called Uncle Mattio's Pizza. It's a franchise concept out of Georgia. There's about 40 locations. There's currently 38 locations, and they're going to use the same equipment that Pizza Fire did. They've done most of the interior work, which wasn't extensive. And frankly, they're just waiting for their sign. There's about a 4-week lead time on the sign. They ordered it about a week ago, and they expect to be open in about 3 weeks. So it's nice to see some vacancies get filled in College Town, Kent there. And of course, it finally got started, the Asawi building at the corner of Erie and Franklin. This is a picture of the hole that was taken actually several weeks ago. If you've been by there lately, there's been a lot of work done inside that hole. And of course, if you recall, this is going to be a 6-story building with a coffee/wine bar and bakery on the first floor, a restaurant on the second floor, and then 16 upscale apartments on the top 4 floors that should be open. Minutia says by the end of the year. I would tend to think it'll probably be more like the spring of next year. We'll see. But there's the rendering of what it's going to look like, and it should be rising above ground here very soon. And then immediately next to that, of course, where the BW3 used to be in a vacant lot now will be the Kent West Apartments, although that is not the final name. But this was approved by the Planning Commission last week. It will look very similar to this. There might be some minor modifications in the coloring, but it's also a 6-story building, be purely residential, and have a total of 47 units. About 7 of which are micro units, and then about 30 of which will be 1-bedroom apartments, and about 10 of which will be 2-bedroom apartments. Again, we'll have a somewhat upscale feel to it, and I think both these buildings will appeal very much to both young professionals and empty nesters.
Tom,
Yes.
they will have their own parking lot where the other building will not?
Could I say that one more time? I'm sorry.
The 2 complexes on the corner of Erie and Franklin, the second one will have their own parking lot. Is that correct?
They will have the Mandalari parking lot, which currently has 25 parking spots. They're working with Jim Bowling to combine it with the city parking lot, make a more efficient layout. They'll have dedicated parking spots for that second building, hopefully as many as 28.
All right,
And then the rest of that parking lot will still be for the city.
All right, the first complex, where are they parking? The parking deck?
The first one will be parked exclusively in the parking deck. So 16 apartments, 16 passes is the current plan.
All right.
And then eventually there'll be some on-street overnight parking over on Franklin Avenue, probably near the bridge, but that's down the road. But that will be to help out with residential parking.
All right, thank you.
John, can I ask a question, John?
Yeah, wherever you're at. Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Go ahead, Roger.
Tom, there's a lot of issues about this parking issue. And when you say a reconfiguration, are the regular, downtown folks, people who go down, are we going to lose parking spots?
Yeah, I think Jim could probably quantify it exactly for you, although the design is not finalized yet. But because of the way people currently park in the city part of that parking lot very haphazardly, by the time we put some curbing in, some landscaping islands and stripes, I'm sure we'll lose, let's say, a dozen parking spots in total. And Jim can correct me if I'm way off base on that, but it's not finalized yet.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of information as we're working on that right now. So Roger, the parking lot at College and Franklin at the moment, it efficiently and properly would only park about 30 cars. The general public park inefficiently and not quite properly about 50 cars. There'll be plenty of times when there's actually 3 cars parked deep and the middle car can't pull out. So if we looked at reconfiguring that lot by ourselves within the property we could get about 30 spots out of it. As we've been looking at it with College Town Kent, we can get that up to about 45 spots in a reconfigured way so that we basically don't lose many inefficient spots and provide those with 45 quality spots for people when they park can be trusted that you can actually get out when they go to leave instead of getting trapped in there. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
So Jim, can I ask another question, John? So Jim, are the people who are going to be in that new Kent West apartments, are they going to be using some of those 45 spots?
No,
Oh, okay. So in
No,
other words, we're
they're big.
not going to have a net loss to the community of parking.
no. So what's going to happen is, by working together, Kent West End can get a few more spots than they can get by working by themselves, and we can get a few more spots than working by ourselves.
Okay.
So when we work together, make it an efficient parking lot, we both get a net gain of parking spots.
And I'm assuming we're talking curving and all new paving over that lot.
Yes, yes. We're looking at curbing on new paving, and we're looking at trying to wrap up doing alleys 8 and 10 at the same time. Now that those two buildings are getting done and Mr. Flynn did the courthouse, it'd be time to go ahead and fix those alleys at the same time as with the parking lot.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
That's it, Roger. Okay.
This is probably familiar to everybody on North Water Street where the Welsh Sherman House is, and right next to it, 257 North Water Street that's been under reconstruction for quite a while. They did lease it to the Finley brothers that operate Witchy's Pizza here in Kent. And they are working through their financing right now and plan to submit plans in April or May and open in October. And it will be a beer and pizza place with a arcade format. And I'm looking forward to that. I think those guys have a really good concept and a handle on what they're doing. So it should really liven up North Water Street and provide a new anchor to it. I didn't have a rendering, but we are going to get another Dunkin' Donuts. It's going to be on South Water Street across from the Marks Plaza. And it'll be slightly smaller than the one downtown. It won't have the second story. And the main reason they really wanted to be on that side of the road is that's the going to work side of the road. So that as people are driving into work each day, it's very convenient for them to pull in there and pull out of with their cup of coffee. And of course, somebody was asking about the extension of the Dora. This might be part of the reason for that. We have the Bell Tower Brewing Company, they'll be opening up on Gogler Avenue where the R.W. Martin building was. They're getting pretty close to submitting plans. Probably the biggest change in the exterior will be the addition of this patio that you see up here that will actually be on the Park Street side of the building. And then the Montrose Mazda expansion is well underway. Actually, this picture is a couple weeks old at this point. But you can see that they're making a significant investment in this. You folks agreed to approve a CRA agreement with them. It's a $5.75 million investment with a total of 10 new jobs over the first 3 years. And that's what the rendering of what it's going to look like when it's all done. So quite a nice improvement.
You like that, Garrett? There's no purple.
And then this is the Davy Tree expansion that was put off by a year because of the COVID pandemic, but they are moving forward full scale ahead. As Bridget presented you the enterprise zone agreement at the last committee meeting. As a reminder, it's a $14 million investment with 35 new jobs over the first 3 years. And they expect to break ground either in late February or sometime in March. And then Jim mentioned the Clean Express Auto Wash that's coming to Franklin Township behind Raising Cane's. That's a representation of what the building will look like. And ironically, or coincidentally, however you want to look at it, we just heard a rumor last week at the Brimfield Kent Jed meeting, I'm sorry, Franklin Kent Jed meeting, that another car wash is going to go across the street at the outlot in front of Gabe's across the driveway from the dollar store. And that was confirmed today by Rhonda, one of our engineers, as they have asked for a water and sewer extension as well. So we are going to have 2 new car washes out there in Franklin Township, right at the city limit. So the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the effect that it had on us, again, this is strictly the economic impact and really had a huge impact in the second quarter. As of course, the shutdown occurred on March 15th, and the partial reopening didn't occur until approximately mid-May. During that time frame, our unemployment went up to 12%. We had a decrease in year-over-year income tax collections of 17%, although a large part of that was attributed to moving the April 15th deadline for net profit tax returns and full year tax returns for individuals to July. Probably one of the biggest effects on downtown was the indefinite closure of Kent Stage and all the outside visitors that they brought to our downtown. And that still hasn't been resolved yet today. We do not know when that's going to reopen. It had, a disproportionate or extraordinary impact on the hospitality businesses as bars and restaurants and hotels were completely closed for approximately 3 months, or let's say 2 months, and then had partial reopenings in May. And then, of course, the cancellation of all the special events in downtown for the entire year had a big impact, not only on the businesses in downtown Kent, but on those nonprofit organizations that have relied on those events for income. So if you look at some of the statistics, this is the income tax revenue year-over-year change throughout the year. And the blue line represents the monthly year-over-year change, and the orange line represents the year-to-date change. And you can see that we started out the year very strongly, probably one of the best starts of the year we've had in a little while. Even Dave Coffey would have called it a robust start to the year. But then you can see in April what happened, that 17% drop that I mentioned earlier, which included the delay of the April 15th deadline, started to rise slightly. And then we had the big peak in July, which is a combination of Kent State doing their buyouts, and that attributed about a fourth of that big increase you see in July. And the other 3/4 of that increase was the July 15th deadline for net profit tax returns and full year tax returns for individuals. And then you see the hodgepodge of what took place after that, where withholding, was strong in August, weak in September and October, strong in November, and then a pretty significant drop off in December, which, by the way, this will not coincide with Rhonda's reports, as she's going to a cash basis starting in January of this year. So December will look different when Rhonda provides her report. But in the end, the year-to-date, year-over-year change of about 3% in the final month in December there is not quite as bad as we anticipated, but we certainly don't know what's going to happen going forward. It's still quite a mystery, and I know Rhonda talked a little bit about some different scenarios that could take place when she presented the budget. I think it was 2 months ago now. And if you look at the income tax revenue by year, you can see we still have that strong growth that occurred between the 2010 and 2015 phase of the major part of the redevelopment of downtown, and then kind of the new plateau in the $14 million to $50 million range since then. It really did not change too much in 2020, but remains to be seen what happens in 2021. And then if you look at unemployment rate by month in the year 2020, you can see the dramatic, we started out very strong. If you recall, many people talking about not enough employees for our businesses back in January, February, March, and then the huge jump in April and May and June. And one of the things that's interesting to note is a trend kind of changed during all this that continued throughout the balance of the year, and that blue is the entire U.S., orange is Ohio, gray is Portage County, and yellow is Kent. And the first part of the year reflects the trend we've seen for the 4 or 5 years that I've been here now, where Ohio has always been higher than the U.S. and Portage County has always been higher than Ohio, but Kent's always been lower than both Ohio and Portage County. And as you can see, starting in April, that really changed where Ohio is now lower typically than US. Portage County is typically lower than Ohio, and Kent is typically lower than all three of them. And it'll be interesting to see if that remains to be the case in 2021. Much of it can be attributed to the strong industrial base in Ohio. I don't know if that explains what's happening in Kent as well. And then there's the unemployment year rate by year, and you can see that it was trending very low and very strong throughout 2019, and the big jump in 2020. And we'll see again what happens in 2021. So some of the conclusions, it's all about COVID. That really affected almost everything that took place economically in 2020, and primarily due to the crater in the second quarter. It was absolutely devastating to small businesses, particularly those related to the hospitality industry. As I mentioned a little bit later, it had a very selective impact on manufacturing and the larger businesses in Kent. Most of those had a very limited effect. Some did very well if they were, I'm not talking about manufacturing now. Some did very well if they had a product that was related to helping with the COVID pandemic. Some did very poorly if they had a product that was negatively affected by the pandemic, such as any business related to the aerospace field because of what's happened with airlines. It also would be remiss not to mention that COVID has had a very disproportionate impact on low-income workers. Many of those people that were laid off or lost their jobs were people that were making very low income as a result of that. And that's probably why it minimized the impact on the income tax revenue to the city of Kent, but a very unfortunate outcome for low-income workers. And then the other big effect was the KSU downsizing that will have a probably longer term effect on income tax revenue. Of course, the more positive news that we just received is that at least KSU did restore the wages that were affected back in May of the people that are still working for Kent State University, but the headcount is still lower than it was prior to the pandemic. And, I wish I could give you all the answers as to what's going to happen in 2021. I don't think any one of us here on the meeting can say, other than the first half of the year is certainly still going to be very negative. And hopefully, as we get into the second half of the year and some of the restrictions are lifted by the state, and we don't have any kind of a relapse, if you will, of the pandemic due to this new more virulent strain, the second half of the year will be more positive and will be reflective of what's going to happen in 2022 going forward. So with that, I'll stop the screen sharing, and I'm certainly open to any questions that people might have.
Tracy, unmute yourself, please. You're still muted. There you go.
Is that escape room thing still going on?
It is, although they've, it's one of those venues that is really effectively still shut down by the state, but they are still in existence. They did just apply for the grant from the city, and they're hoping that the state will allow that type of a business to operate fairly soon. It's kind of like the Kent Stage. It's a closed venue.
Okay.
Tom, did I see a sold sign on the Claiborne property where the old nursery and the old West Side Market was? Did I see a banner that said sold across that? Yeah, he had put a for sale sign up there that wasn't there when we had met with him earlier on. And then he put it up for sale. I was just curious. I thought I saw sold on it when I drove by. That's why I almost drove off the road.
I think that still reflects the fact that Claiborne bought it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's still reflecting Clayton.
So no change there, and their long-term plans is to put a Lincoln dealership
Right.
there when Lincoln forces them to.
Yeah. Okay.
Seeing nothing more.
I have a question.
Robin, did you have something to say?
No.
Okay, Tracy?
Heidi's before me. Go on, Heidi.
I have two questions. Have we had any nibbles on the Longitanos property, and what's going on with the Record Courier property out on?
We have had nibbles on the Longitanos property. Probably the biggest issue is the liquor license associated with that property is the D56. I'm sorry. I believe it's the D56. I may have that wrong, but it's a license that requires you to have at least 75% of your revenue come from food as opposed to alcohol. And that's making it difficult for a new business model to be created for it. But there's been several parties that are interested in it. It is a relative, and I do use that term advisedly because it hasn't been taken very well care of over the past year or so, but almost a turnkey operation for a restaurant. And I'd like to think it will reopen sometime later this year. And then I'm sorry, your second question, the record publishing building.
Yeah, Record Publishing.
It is still for sale. There has been a little bit of interest in it. The good news is it's actually owned by Gannett Publishing now. And Gannett does plan to maintain a presence in there and lease about, I believe about 7,500 square feet from the new owners, which makes it a safer purchase for a new owner. But they have yet to have a serious offer or a serious buyer express interest in it yet.
Tom, I didn't hear you mention anything about Wendy's.
Wendy's is undergoing just a complete and total renovation. I've never seen a building gutted that much without being torn down. They were originally going to tear it down and build a new one, and began to realize that would create more of a permitting process for them. And so they decided to keep it in its current configuration. But it will be virtually a brand new Wendy's when they're done.
Need a glass
They
of
did
water.
get control of the old Robin Hood property about 2 or 3 years
Because I'm
ago.
thirsty.
Mike,
That little one.
If you folks lost my voice on, they did get control of the old Robin Hood property about 2 or 3 years ago, which will allow them to put a driveway out onto Lincoln Street, which will improve the accessibility of the Wendy's property once they reopen. I would imagine, I'm guessing slightly based on my experience in the business, but they'll probably be reopened in about 60 days.
Good, good. Any more questions from council? Okay, Tom did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And
And thank you, everybody, for your time.
That's
All right, moving on to Finance Committee, Mr. DeLeon. Unmute yourself.
You're still muted.
Mike.
It's working on it. I can read lips. Bottom left of the screen.
Well, I had a whole screen doing something. Okay, budget appropriation amendments.
Good evening, everybody. I have submitted a budget amendment for the appropriations to the city manager dated January 26th. And I was hoping that council could approve that budget amendment this evening.
Questions from council? Seeing none.
Move to approve with emergency.
Move to approve.
You have to go to the audience, don't you?
Audience.
Yeah, there's no audience there. So, John, you made a motion. Who seconded?
I think Robin did.
Okay, we're second by Robin. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now Jim with his Swift Nesting Habitat Grant. This is new.
This is new. This is new, and this is something really different. This is something we're really not used to doing. We're very excited about it. I get just a little brief history on sort of how this came about. In looking at the demolition of the former police station, that building and specifically its chimney was used as habitat for the and 4-H groups would come and they would stay in the fall and the spring, and they would watch the swift swarm into and out of the chimney. And that was brought up to us several years ago when the first discussions of the new police building were coming up. And so we've had some people looking into the idea of these chimney swift towers. It's basically like a standalone chimney, which we provided image in your packet. Hopefully you got it. And sort of after the police station was done and all the bills were finalized out, and we're looking at small things to improve what's going on, we felt that this would be consistent with Kent values. And if we placed it along the hike and bike trail between the university and the police station, and as people were doing research on it, and we really found it really had some interesting historical ties to the city besides just the chimney swift, whether to some pretty prominent research that was done by a Kent State professor nationally. So in doing some of this research, we got noticed by Ohio Department of Natural Resources, which basically said, hey, we'll give you money if you continue to work, get this project done. So they provided us a small $1,000 grant that we're asking for your approval to accept. And then in looking at it, we look to submit a grant application to the Kent Environmental Council, which has an environmental grant every year for another $1,000. It's an exciting small project that we do, but we feel it can have a nice enhancement added addition to the community. So.
Questions? Tracy?
Yeah, I see that you have one by the police station. Are we planning to do maybe a couple of more around the city?
Actually, yes, there are some discussions about that. Depending how well this goes, we've talked to Parks and Rec about putting others in parks around the city and other locations.
Or maybe by other places where there used to be chimneys, like out there by the new Smithers and stuff.
As long as we have property in the area, yes.
Heidi?
Yeah, what's the timetable for this? I mean, we're looking at demolition of the old police station soon. So are we going to get on this like ASAP?
Yes, this spring, this fall, I'm sorry, this spring, this summer, we're looking at constructing it, assuming council is in approval of the grant requests. We've already started in contacting with contractors who would build that chimney and where it would go.
So
yes.
let me just clarify. So we're not going to leave the chimney swifts homeless. There's not going to be a gap between when the building's taken down and the new tower's built.
We're going to try not to. I can't say it's a guarantee, but we have talked to our crews about making sure that we cap off the existing chimney this year so they don't nest into that existing chimney before we do demolition.
Oh,
So,
they
but
have a nesting
what do you
season.
do?
So
I'm sorry.
they have a nesting season that we need to be conscious of.
Yes, right now they're in South America,
Okay.
keeping the cold. And they come back up around April. So our staff has talked to our maintenance crews and asked to cap the chimney before April so that there's not a nesting pair that nest in the chimney before it's demolished. But as the current schedule goes, this new chimney would be up before the building's demolished.
Okay, so before they come back, so they're not going to like go to Stowe or anything like that. I don't want to lose our chimney swifts.
No, I don't believe so. And they nest in other areas besides just that one chimney. So there are other chimneys in town.
I don't know, our goats went someplace and they never came back.
Further questions, Gwen?
Yes, so this is a threatened species, is that right? And they have federal protections, is that right, Jim?
It's an international threatened species. Since it migrates from South America all the way up to Canada, that's where it falls under. So there's nothing in the United States that declares a migratory bird like this a threatened species. But the international one, it's threatened, yes.
And from what I understand, their habitat is near like the waterways, like the river, because they consume like zillions of bugs and insects and things like that. So we'd probably have to maybe reach out to the health department to make sure that they weren't spraying for mosquito or things like that, or just kind of see if there's something that we need to do to address to make sure that the area, at the very least, that the area around the chimney, it can be protected. I know that we have to be careful of that because of West Nile, though, but maybe that's something we should probably look into too.
We're learning many things that we knew before it for this. So yes.
Okay, but I guess I'm very excited about it, and it's such an interesting and naturally occurring phenomenon. And I understand that there are people in your department who worked very, very hard to see this come to fruition. Are they aware of any other communities that have unique and special animals that they celebrate, perhaps for an economic benefit?
Yes, they are. And they brought that up for the past 2 or 3 years as they've been pushing this. And that's just one of the many arguments to move forward with it. So
yes. So it would make us cooler than Austin with their bats and Hinckley with their buzzards, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Is there someplace we can send all the coyotes, Jim? That's the question. They're a town and wants to,
we can send them to a different city.
But don't forget
Further questions?
Trails on our bridge.
We have locks on our bridge.
What are they?
Further questions?
I'd like to move to go ahead and authorize a request of the grant monies.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yes, I have something I'd like to say. There are other cities, like I mentioned, that do this, and there actually are in-depth economic studies about bird watching and the economic impact that bird watchers can bring to a community. We have a very special opportunity here with the threatened species to not only provide a habitat and further protect the survival of their species, but also a little bit self-serving, create a drive for tourism dollars, ecotourism. Actually, this is a rare occurring phenomenon where these birds form this huge tornado. And I think that it dovetails, if you don't mind the pun, really nicely with some of our event plans for downtown, having chimney swifts that fly around exactly at dusk as people are out enjoying their doras, specifically during the summer months, is something that very easily, I think, small businesses downtown can kind of rally around, celebrate a little bit. And I would hope that maybe the opportunity to provide some sort of plans for privately owned or privately built chimney swift towers on some of our downtown businesses, since the swifts already come to places where people habitat, I think would be really exciting. And I, for one, would really encourage property owners downtown to kind of follow through on this and see what we can do with it. Thank you.
Heidi?
Yeah, well said, Gwen. I just wanted to share that we've had experiences enjoying the Dora and the chimney swifts in downtown Kent, and it's really quite magical and delightful. And so when I saw this was coming to us, I was pretty excited about that. Very cool. And, you know, I like that it's also represented on the Kent State Seal. Who knew that?
I did.
It was a golden eagle. It's a chimney
They used to have the bike racks up there that were the chimney swifts, the little round circles with the thing.
Oh.
All right, is anything further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. That ends the Finance Committee.
Thank you.